Growing up, I believed my family was picture perfect. My parents, Claire and Tom, were high school sweethearts who married young and had me when they were 25. My childhood was filled with warm memories, weekends at my grandparents' lake house, my father teaching me how to fish while my mother prepared sandwiches. Every Friday we had family game nights, and bedtime stories were a shared tradition. It wasn't perfect, of course. My parents argued sometimes, like all couples do, but I always felt safe and loved. And then everything changed. At 10 years old, I started noticing small shifts. My father began coming home later, his voice filled with tension when he spoke to my mother. Mom looked more tired, more withdrawn. I overheard hushed arguments behind closed doors, my mother's voice breaking, my father's defensive replies. I didn't understand what was happening until the day I came home from school and found my mother crying at the kitchen table. "We need to talk, sweetheart," she said softly, her eyes red-rimmed. That was the day I learned about Tanya. My father had been having an affair with a woman from work, and my mother, devastated but determined, filed for divorce. The next few months were a whirlwind of confusion and grief. I remember sitting outside the courtroom feeling lost as my parents fought over custody and property. In the end, my mother was awarded primary custody, while my father was given visitation rights every other weekend. At first, I didn't want to go. I was angry, heartbroken, and I didn't want to leave. My mother alone, she, however, insisted. "Your father made a mistake," she told me, "but he still loves you. It's okay to love him too." Hesitantly, I started visiting him. The first few weekends were awkward, but my father tried. He'd take me to the movies, make terrible attempts at cooking, and listen to me talk about school. Slowly, I started to feel comfortable again, until Tanya entered the picture. The first time we met, she greeted me with a big smile and a gift, a diary with my name engraved on it. "I thought you might like to write down your thoughts," she said sweetly. I thanked her, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that she was the reason my family had fallen apart. Tanya tried hard, too hard, to bond with me. She bought me clothes, books, art supplies, planned mother-daughter spa days. But it all felt forced. It wasn't just that I wanted to be loyal to my mother, it was that Tanya acted as if she could replace her. And then when I was 16, she got pregnant. My father was overjoyed, talking constantly about how excited he was to have a real family again. Those words shattered me. Did that mean I wasn't enough? That I wasn't part of his real family? Then, at 20 weeks, Tanya miscarried. I watched as my father and Tanya grieved, and I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for their loss. Guilt for my small sense of relief. But Tanya changed after that. She clung to me more than ever, introducing me as her daughter, asking me to call her Mom. When I refused, she cried. My father, instead of understanding, scolded me for being insensitive. "She's been trying so hard," he said. "You need to be more understanding. Her feelings, always her feelings. But what about mine?" Through it all, my mother remained my rock. She never spoke badly about my father or Tanya, even when she had every right to. She just loved me, unconditionally, without expectation. Years later, I met Richard in college, and we fell in love. Unlike my fractured family, his was stable, supportive. He showed me what love without conditions looked like. When we got engaged, I knew exactly who I wanted to walk me down the aisle. My mother. She had been my steadfast supporter, my role model, my home. When I told my father and Tanya, the explosion was immediate. Tanya burst into tears. My father's face turned red with anger. "You're being selfish," he spat. "Tanya has been in your life for years. She deserves to walk with you, too." I refused. This was my wedding, my choice. My father gave me an ultimatum: include Tanya, or he wouldn't come at all. I stood my ground, but a part of me ached. Why did he always choose her over me? For weeks, they ignored me. Then, one day, Tanya called, crying. She apologized for everything, for pushing too hard, for making me uncomfortable. I softened, until she asked me for something shocking. "If you won't let me walk you down the aisle," she said, "would you walk me down the aisle at our vow renewal ceremony next year?" I was speechless. Did she think this was a fair trade? That my wedding and her vow renewal were the same? I told her no. She broke down, accusing me of never giving her a chance. She brought up the miscarriage again, telling me how much she had. Wanted to be my mother, and that's when I snapped. "Tanya," I said, "your miscarriage was painful, but it's not my burden to carry. I'm not responsible for filling the hole in your heart." She left in tears. That night, my father called me, furious. "If you can't accept Tanya as your mother," he said coldly, "maybe I shouldn't be your father." And for the first time in my life, I realized he already wasn't. A month later, my father showed up at my apartment, unannounced. "She's gone," he said. "Tanya left me." I stared at him, stunned. "She said she couldn't take the rejection anymore," he continued. "She went to stay with her sister." Then, he told me something that shattered me. We were trying for a baby back then, because Tanya thought if we had a child together, you'd have to accept her. I felt sick. They had tried to manipulate me into a relationship with her. I told my father I needed space. For the first time, I prioritized myself. Despite everything, I left my father's wedding invitation open. To my surprise, he came. Alone. As my mother walked me down the aisle, I saw my father sitting in the front row, looking proud, but also regretful. He spoke briefly with my mother, a small step toward peace. After the wedding, we talked. He apologized. He admitted his mistakes. Tanya, meanwhile, stayed away. And for now, that's how I want it. Richard and I are starting a new chapter together. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my father, but I do know one thing. For the first time in my life, I chose me. And that was the best decision I ever made. Looking forward to. Thank you to everyone who helped me on this journey. Your guidance and encouragement helped me get through this terrible situation and begin this new chapter in my life on a positive note. It won't be easy, and there will be a lot of pain to deal with, but I'm willing to try. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking, real-life stories happening around you.